Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Wednesday morning, December the 8th, and I'm happy to be here. This is one child abuse survivor to another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open, and I did pop the link in there to what we were looking at yesterday, and it's just interesting information from angerresources.com, www.angerresources, angerresources.com. And so, thanks everybody for being here. I'm just having a coffee, waking up, and just glad to be able to continue to do these shows. This week, we'll finish up with this article, and then we'll move on. But this website is awesome, and there's so much information on there. You could spend a lot of time looking around at this website. There's information. There's links and videos and seminars and frequently asked questions about anger management. And most people, at some point in their life, probably have experienced these issues, whether it's road rage or, don't have to be abused to get something out of this website. Like, this website's really awesome, and I hope everybody will take a look at it. I just thought it was very helpful for me because I had a lot of anger management issues. I really didn't know how to manage my anger properly, wasn't shown how as a child, and then took these behavioral problems into my adulthood, and then realized I didn't want to hurt anybody, so I was just stuffing my anger. And so, it really wasn't handling it all that well. And so this website's very helpful for me just to see, how we can help ourselves to become assertive and learn how to stand up for ourselves and be assertive with what we need, with our needs and what we're thinking, but without being abusive or without stuffing the anger, right? So it's a great website. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. We'll get right into this. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, and I say this on every show, but it's just important for people to know. And so you have to listen at your own discretion because I'm talking about all the issues surrounding abuse, right? It's a very sensitive topic for most people. For me, it's just my life. So, I've lived this my whole life, and I don't mind talking about it. But it's very sensitive for a lot of people. So if you find the topic is just too much for you and it's going to bother you, just turn the show off. You have to ultimately be responsible for what you listen to. So, you have to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows from an adult, someone who cares about you, parent or caregiver. Hopefully you have someone in your life that cares about what you're doing online. And mainly because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows, because the players can be placed around anywhere, right? So, if you're a young person under the age of 18, do yourself a favor and me a favor and learn how to keep yourself safe online. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we are fighting to help save children's lives and protect children and stop child abuse, right? So you have to be very careful what you're doing online, young people. There's so many very sick people out there who are trying to get a hold of children, and so you should know how to keep yourself safe online. And if you don't know, just type into your browser internet safety, online safety for children, online safety for youth, or internet safety, anything like that, and it will bring up websites where you can get that information on how to keep yourself safe online, and especially in chat rooms. That's where these crazy psycho people, child sexual predators and pedophiles, try to get a hold of children. And so you need to know how to protect yourself. And really, my show is all about stopping child abuse and stuff, but the thing is there's a lot of adult content on my shows, mature content, and young people under the age of 18 have the right to protection. And so I'm just, putting this out to you that you will let someone know if you're listening to this show, let an adult know, and then see if they agree that it's something that you should be listening to. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll just get right into this topic here. We left off talking about this yesterday. This is from Dave Decker from angerresources.com, and the foundations of effective anger management, where to start if you want to change what you do with your anger. And we were reading through here. He's got a whole bunch of different foundations, like 1 through however many. And we went through it and found first foundation is anger is normal, natural human emotion. It's normal. Foundation 2 is anger is not the same thing as hostility, cynicism, withdrawal, aggression, abuse, or violence. And number 3, the third foundation, how we express anger is learned primarily from important people in our childhood. And then that's where we left off there. And so we'll pick up on number 4, the fourth foundation. Both men and women receive strong cultural messages about how to express anger. And I'm just reading right from the page, and you can go there too, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES.com. And he says here, both men and women are programmed by our families and society at large to express anger in particular ways. Although these ways are certainly changing some in recent decades, especially for women, in general, men are taught to become aggressive and lash out at others when they're angry. Think about masculine images on TV, in the movies, and in sports and business settings. What do many men in the movies do when they confront a difficult situation? Dave Decker says they kick butt. And we often talk about men who are angry and assertive as tough, strong, confident, and take charge guys. These sorts of family and societal messages invite many men to communicate their anger in hurtful and disrespectful ways. So women, on the other hand, he says here, are frequently taught to become passive and polite, withdraw from potential conflict, and stuff the anger that they feel. What do we call women who are angry and assertive? It does not take long to think of the one word that our culture uses to describe that behavior in women, and it does not have a positive connotation. This does not mean that women do not get angry. They do. Often people who are consistently passive carry a huge reservoir of resentment. In a study of 535 women ages 25 to 66 entitled Women in Anger, edited by Sandra Thomas, she reported that women frequently get angry most often at husbands and coworkers. She also found that the younger a woman, the more likely she was to get angry and express it directly. In addition, she reported that women are over 55 reported the least anger. So that's just very interesting. Yeah, men, the whole society's way of looking at how men should behave and how they should act is all tough, macho. The stuff we see on TV, the men are always, in someone's face and if they're angry, pushing people around or, resorting to physical violence and all this stuff. And on TV and in the movies, it looks great to our society. We think it's awesome, right? And then the sad thing is a lot of people think that that's how we're supposed to behave towards other people, especially a lot of men, like young boys seeing that, if they see that in the home and then they see that on TV, then obviously they're just going to take on those behaviors. It's not even their fault. And women, the same thing, a lot of people think that women don't get angry, but they do. And many women just stuff their anger because they're told when they're brought up, in homes where their parents or their mother tells their daughters, not to act out and just that they need to be passive and just take whatever comes their way. And, a lot of people are brought up like that. And so, they stuff their anger and then it becomes a real problem. I didn't stuff my anger until I got older because I used to be very aggressive. And then I decided, I don't want it since I obviously couldn't seem to get a handle on my anger issues. I just thought, I won't hurt people. I don't want to hurt people. So I just stuffed the anger and then it just built up a huge, like Dave Decker says here, a reservoir of anger. Becomes rage. So it's not good to stuff the anger either, right? We have to learn how to deal with this stuff. He says this also does not mean that women cannot be disrespectful and punishing. They can. It is not okay for either men or women to allow their anger to become demeaning and abusive with partners, children, or others. There are also anger management classes available for women based on the principles discussed in this article. And it says these stereotypes are certainly not accurate for everyone. In many ways, may be changing at this time in history, but there is still some validity in them for many men and women. It is helpful to be aware of how these messages may have affected you personally if you are going to do something different with anger that has become a problem for you. Well, that's right, because even, yesterday we left off talking about how, depending on what type of home that we grew up in and who was our parents and caregivers who raised us, we can have some real issues, not knowing how to handle our anger properly if we learned all these bad behaviors as a child. And, because anger, is not, like you said, it's not abuse, right? It's not cynicism. It's not hostility. That's not anger. Those are distortions of anger, according to Dave Decker. And so they're perversions of anger. So anytime people are doing this stuff, taking their anger out on people abusively, that's a distortion of anger. It's a perversion of anger, and they shouldn't be doing it. But most people learn how to do that as a young child, right? And so not all, just some, right? So that's the whole thing, some of this doesn't apply to everyone, obviously, right? But I know that, the way that I grew up, that was the case. And a lot of my friends that I saw, had anger management problems, grew up in the same kind of homes I did. And so it just seemed to be, it makes sense to me, right? But it's horrible, and we have to learn how to undo what we were taught as children, right? That's the whole issue, right? I had to go back and, especially in my early 20s when I decided to change my behavior, I had to sit there and make a conscious effort to change the way I was treating people and the way that I was handling situations, because I had been so aggressive and not a passive person when I was young, right? I wasn't passive because of the abuse that I was suffering at home actually turned me very much aggressive, because that's how I was being treated at home. So I was just modeling my parents' behavior. And so if I didn't like something somebody was doing, especially as a young child, I'd be very aggressive, and I'd be very abusive towards them, whether it was verbally or physically, pushing little kids down, hitting little kids. But that's what was happening to me in my home. See, so I was just kind of modeling what was happening to me, and I didn't want little kids coming up to me and hugging me. I had this one little kid that on the block that used to come up to hug me. She was a few years younger than me, and she was so cute. And I was young. I mean, I'm talking maybe, I don't know, 6 years old, 7 years old or something. And she would come up to hug me, and I would just push her down, push her away. Like I wouldn't hurt her. I'd just be like, get away from me, because that's what my mom was doing to me. She was just pushing me away all the time, telling me to get away from her. So I just learned all this stuff, from my parents, and then of course was beaten for it. They taught me how to behave and then beat me for it, because my behavior was, according to them, bad, right? But they weren't taking a look at their own behavior and thinking, wow, where's my daughter learning this stuff from? Where's our daughter learning this stuff from? Maybe it's us. Obviously, my parents were brought up on abuse charges. They were two of the most abusive, ignorant people that I've ever seen on this planet. But the thing is that obviously they weren't going to take a look and realize that they had taught us how to behave, right? They were just going to blame us for everything, right? So that's abusers. That's what abusers do. So sad enough, later on in life, I've had to undo everything. Really, that's what I'm working on, to undo all of these behaviors and these horrible behaviors, and undo this damage that my parents did so many years ago. And it's a lot of work, because I sometimes don't even recognize some of it, because it's just my life. It's the way I've been living for so long, especially in areas such as self-sabotaging, and areas of this sort of thing, conflict resolution, this type of stuff, right, with anger and dealing with anger and properly and stuff like this. This is all should be normal. It should be, something that isn't such a problem for people if they're brought up properly and they get the right the right messages when they're young, But if you don't, you have to go back and undo all that and get some help with it if you can't. And that's the thing, right? We ultimately are responsible for our behavior. So whether or not we've been seeing these messages from the TV or socially, out in the communities or in our own families where we've learned and taken on these roles of being abusive and hurting other people just because of our anger management issues, we're ultimately responsible for our behavior, just like my parents were ultimately responsible for theirs. And, whether they wanted to take responsibility for it or not, they were at fault. It was their fault, and they were to blame. And so the blame has to go where the blame goes, and that's on each individual one of us for, if we're not going to watch what we're doing and we're going to be abusive, it is our problem. It is our fault. And I didn't want to be an abuser, you know what I mean? That's the last thing I wanted to be. And so it's taken me a long, long time, to work through a lot of this stuff. And I had to get my feelings straight, and I didn't really begin my healing journey until 20 years later after I started working on things like this. But that's okay, because as long as you start somewhere, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? It's just important to start somewhere. So the fifth foundation, we need to be honest with ourselves about our anger and how it affects us and others. Addressing anger effectively means that you need to do an honest self-examination about whether your anger is creating problems for you or those around you. Denying that anger is a problem when it is actually taking a toll on your life is never helpful. Noticing how others respond to you when you are angry. For example, do they shy away or seem fearful and intimidated? And listening to others' verbal feedback about how they are reacting to you. For instance, do people tell you directly that they do not like how you express your anger? Can be helpful reality tests, right? Often chronically angry people do not think much about how they are impacting and affecting those around them. Being honest with yourself about whether you have experienced consequences like the loss of important relationships or even legal problems can be another way to assess whether you need to do something different with your anger. So finally, it is important to be clear about whether chemical use and mental health issues may be contributing to what happens with your anger. This does not mean that either of these causes your anger problem, but it does mean that it is critical to notice whether there is connection between alcohol and drug use and disrespectful anger, or whether there are underlying issues like depression or anxiety that are part of what needs to be addressed in looking at your anger. And if these issues do exist and they are not adequately addressed, little will probably change about how you handle your anger. So we have to be honest with ourselves, really. I mean, I like what he says here. It's very important. If we're going to ever change, any of these situations in our lives, we really have to be honest and take a good, honest look at what's going on. And sometimes it's hard to do because, sometimes, like I said, we don't recognize stuff, even though we think, I'm being honest with myself. We might not recognize what we're doing because we don't see it, just because possibly we've been doing it forever and it just seems very natural to us. But we have to be willing to really take a look at what we're doing. And if we're being abusive to people or just passive and letting people walk all over us, or being aggressive and abusive towards people, we need to be honest with ourselves and then figure out what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, learn the triggers, learn what's behind it, right? And then get some help with it. And like if you can't do it on your own with self-help stuff, then you can reach out and get some help somewhere, right? Because you certainly don't want to become an abuser, and you also don't want to self-destruct because you're just stuffing the anger. We deserve to be a normal, human being on this planet, allowed to assert ourselves when we need to. Anger is normal. It's going to happen. We're going to get angry. But yet, do we have to be abusive or do we have to be passive and just stuff it? I mean, no. Like, I just think that we need to learn how to be able to say, tell people what our needs are, like Dave Decker says, and then learn how to be assertive without hurting people or hurting ourselves, right? This is the whole issue. So life would be so much better on this planet if people would straighten up and get some anger management classes, because most people, you can just imagine most of these murders here have taken place between adults and even between parents killing their children because of child abuse issues. It's because they're angry and they decide that that child or that adult is really bothering them. And so they decide to, to take it to the extreme. Abusers, it's choice, right? People choose to abuse. So it's like, parents will kill their children for taking a muffin off the stove, right? Or for, soiling their pants, or for just making too much noise. I mean, this is the headlines out here, people. And the thing is I know I grew up in this. Parents will abuse their children for little or no reason because they are angry at the world and they are for whatever reason, so pissed off at life or whatever. Or just having kids, because a lot of people pop out kids and don't want them, and that's a fact. Parents don't want to admit it, but the thing is they should take a good look at themselves and, be honest with themselves, right? A lot of people end up having children that don't want them and then, treat them like garbage and kill them because they're stressed out because they never really wanted those kids in the first place. And this is ridiculous. That's how I grew up. But the thing is it's absolutely stupid to think that, that people aren't responsible for their own behavior, because they are. So we are all responsible for our behavior. So however I'm behaving now, I can't blame my parents. I know what the cause is, and I can kind of take a look and say, well, I think I see where, what happened. It's really quite behavioral, and I just picked it up along the way. But the thing is it is my problem when I, as an adult, choose to, not handle things properly and fly off the handle at people or hurt people, right? It's our responsibility to not do that, right? We are responsible for our own behavior. So we can't, I don't really like to use these excuses of, I was abused as a child or this and that. It's like, well, it's not an excuse, It's like, it's just not. Like, that's what my parents' excuse, they never really, they were both abused as children, but their excuse was that they just hated each other and they hated us, and, but my mom would sometimes use the excuse that she was abused as a child, but she just wanted to have her way, right? And so she was sick and tired of being in this marriage with my dad, so having him pushing her around and abusing her, assaulting her on a regular basis, she was just sick and tired of it, and, was deciding to take charge, and also, and in doing so, became an abuser as well. So that's the thing, we are responsible for our behavior. And if we have anger-related issues, really, it is our problem, and we do have to get help with it. So that's why it's important to take a look at this stuff. Most people can probably relate to this stuff, I used to have road rage. I used to have all that stuff, driving down the road and screaming at people, flipping people off, chasing people down in my car. Like I was when I was younger, I was, people had to kind of stay clear from me because I was really quite aggressive and scary. Now it's different because I care about people and I care about myself, And, I've learned how to do this, and especially those last few years. This last, I would say, 4 years since I started my healing journey. I'm starting to wake up and smell the coffee and say, wow, okay, I see. I took a big, long, look at the issues, and I was very honest with myself. And that's what we have to do. We have to sit down and be honest with ourselves, right? If we're going to ever fix any of this stuff, right? Or allow, someone else to help us out with this, whether it's a therapist or counselor or, a group support or an online group support or even a friend. It won't do any good to not be honest about the situation, because nothing will change. Dave Decker's absolutely correct on that. He says very little will change if we're not going to be 100% honest with ourselves and everyone else around us, right? The sixth foundation is anger and other feelings are our responsibility. Oh, well, that's what we're talking about. No one makes you become explosive, punishing, or disrespectful. Others can certainly trigger and contribute to anger and other emotional reactions you experience, but no one has the power to cause you to feel or behave in a certain way. In fact, different people can experience very different reactions to exactly the same situation or person. And the very same trigger that can create a powerful angry reaction in you on one occasion can provoke a very different and more positive response when you are in an upbeat and happy mood. So your feelings come from within you and are a unique and complicated mixture of biology and your life experiences. Ultimately, you need to realize this and become accountable for them. So often we expect others to fix our feelings or make us feel better, and when they do not do this, because in reality they can't, we then have even more reason to respond with frustration or punishing and explosive behavior. At some point, this process needs to stop. It says you will never be willing to handle your anger differently if it is someone else's responsibility to do it for you. And that's very true. I really like what he says there. He's like, we expect other people to fix our feelings and make us feel better. The reason I'm laughing is because that's exactly the way that I used to be before I started on my healing journey. I'd sit around feeling sorry for myself, having pity parties, really was, and understandably so, looking back at what had happened to me as a child and looking back at the destruction of my family. And it would cause me a lot of depression. Flashbacks would come and, I'd have nightmares about the abuse. And just because I lived it, I know this is my reality, you know what I mean? So it's like, it almost seems like a horror movie just playing back in my mind all the time, because some parts of it were just like a horror movie. And then, I was thinking in the back of my mind, wow, I wish somebody could take my pain away. That was my big thing. I wanted somebody to be able to take my pain away. It's like, I wish somebody could come and do that. I was expecting friends to do that. I was expecting that somebody one day would be able to help me out to feel better, and that, they'd be able to take my pain away. And I really did not think of it differently until 4 years ago when I started on my healing journey, when I realized I was the only one that could do it. It wasn't going to be my parents. My mom was never going to apologize for what she did, even if she was still alive today. I know that she wouldn't, right? Because she never did. And so she, on her deathbed, she really never did apologize, right? So I doubt she would have, right? So that was never going to happen. And we sometimes can't get our parents to see what they did, or other people in our lives who have abused us, right? Whether it's a sibling or whether it's a husband or wife, partners, boyfriend, girlfriend. A lot of times we're not going to get that closure on that. We're not going to get what we needed from that, because the other person may or may not be living, or they may be unavailable, they may be mentally ill, they may actually just really feel good about what they did, right? That's a huge issue. I'm reading a book right now, and it's an interesting book, and he's a psychiatrist, and he sent it to me, actually. He's going to be a guest on my show coming up here pretty soon. Troubled Childhood, Triumphant Life, Healing from the Battle Scars of Youth, and this is by James P. Krehbiel, Krehbiel, ed.s, LPC, CCBT. Anyways, he's a psychiatrist, and he works out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And he's written this book called Troubled Childhood, Triumphant Life, Healing from the Battle Scars of Youth. And I haven't gotten all the way through it, actually. I just got the book, and I'm reading through, just sort of starting it. But he was saying, in his book here, I'm not going to quote him, but I hope you will check this book out. It's really actually quite interesting. And when we have the show, I'll be sure to announce it, right? He says a lot of times that we're looking for, that as survivors of abuse and a dysfunctional family, right, we are oftentimes looking for an apology or some sort of love and care from our parents that we never had, or caregivers, whoever was looking after us that hurt us or that abused us. And that we're kind of, sometimes, not all the time, wishing that they would own up to what they did and then treat us right. And he says that, quite often it's just not the case. It's not going to happen. It's like they sometimes can make things worse by trying to get your parents or whoever abused you to see things a certain way, because they very well may feel that what they did to you or me was perfectly okay, right? And so it sets us up as adults for another whole bunch of heartache. So I haven't read all the way through his book, but anyway, it's very interesting, and I'll be sure and be passing this information on to everybody when I'm done, because I want to finish reading the book, and then he's when we can both work out a schedule and a time, he's going to be a guest on the show. And so the book is very interesting, and I'm just kind of getting into it right now. So I'll be sure and let everybody know what's going on with that. But I could sort of see what he was saying there, because all my life I was always wishing that my mom would just, before she passed away, would just tell me that she was first of all apologize and admit what she did to me, and apologize and say that it was wrong and that she loved me and that she really didn't mean to hurt me and stuff. And that was never going to happen. That was just my own inner child wishing for that, And I mean, I had to get real about the whole thing and realize that no one can change the past. We can't go back and change the past. And we can't go back and rewrite the past. But we definitely have a choice of how we face today and the future and how we see things, you know what I mean? Like, we can change the way that we feel about ourselves, first of all. And we can undo a lot of the damage, that was done as, to us as children. And we don't have to continue to suffer on in that cycle, wishing that someone else would come and help us and take away this pain. That's what I was always doing. And of course, it was never going to happen, so I was going to continue on that cycle, always, looking for someone to take my pain away, and then because they couldn't, wanting to self-injure or commit suicide, you know what I mean? And so the whole issue is that we need to learn how to self-nurture ourselves, We need to become that parent that was missing. This is just me throwing this in here because I've read this on other websites. We need to actually become those parents that were not there for us when we needed them, and learn how to self-soothe and self-nurture. And first of all, stand up and realize that, hey, we did not deserve that. You know what I mean? And also that we do deserve to have a good life. And that, man, we got to start learning how to treat ourselves properly, how to think about ourselves, in a more positive light, and see ourselves differently than our parents or these caregivers or whoever it was that abused us, and made us feel so down. We need to change the view, right? We need to rewrite that life script, like Dave says. Dave Decker here says, that life script that people, our parents or whoever wrote for us, expected us to play it out, whether it was a life of abuse or a life of neglect, a life of misery and suffering. Why do we have to continue to play that life script out? My parents wrote a life script for me and my siblings. My siblings also have their sets of life script for me. There's only 2 left, but they have their own set life scripts written for me too. And I don't care. I don't care about their life scripts that they wrote for me. I tore up most of them and anyone, in my mind, it's like, no, I'm done with that. If they can't support me in what I'm doing on my healing journey, then too bad for them. Because I can't go along with their dysfunction any longer, right? I have to move forward in order to save my life. And so that's the whole issue, right? I mean, sometimes things have to be done, and we can't, I made a clear decision that I was no longer going to sit around and play that life script out, and I was going to rewrite a new one, which means getting my mental health, good, getting myself to a good, and feeling better, about life and about myself, which was to do a whole lot of self-soothing and self-nurturing, right? And to tell myself, I do deserve to have a good life, I did not deserve to be treated the way I was as a child. Whether my family believes it or not, my family thinks it was okay that my mom did what she did to me. And then because I told them about the sexual abuse from a sibling, they think that's okay too, because they never ever said a word to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that's not right. And I have had no one come by and no, not even my sister, come by and try to console me on that and try to just be here for me and, listen to me and talk with me and talk to me. They don't care. They think it's okay, right? So, that's sad, right? And sometimes we won't have those people in our lives. So we have to really learn how to rely on ourselves, and we have to reach out to other people around us who can possibly be there for us, right? So you make the phone call, you do whatever you have to do to get some help, If you are having a hard time and struggling, you have every right to stay here and have a good life and feel good about yourself and enjoy this life and heal and learn to move forward. And to help, get to take that pain away, but stick around. That's what I'm saying. Never give up. Never, because I'm not letting my parents win this fight, man. I'm going to have a good life, and and it's just such a great feeling, to be on this side of it, because I'm like, yes, I win, and that makes me incredibly happy, because I certainly didn't deserve to be treated the way I was, and neither do you. So make sure that you reach out and get some help wherever it is. Talk to someone. If you have to, call a crisis line, but do whatever you have to do, and you stay here with us and hang on, and never ever give up. Have a great day, everybody. I'll be back on tonight on my show and Dreamcatchers Talk Radio as well. And if you need something, I'll get a hold of me out here on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, whatnot. And I look forward to chatting with you all again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.